So are leaders born or made? What causes the leadership behavior you commonly demonstrate? Is management and leadership the same? Do you have a single leadership framework? Let's call it servant leadership or emotional intelligence or participative leadership that you use most of the time? In today's talk, I'll cut through all of this and I'll offer an alternative way of thinking about and practicing leadership that will, if you act upon it consistently and persistently, move you into elite leadership status. Hi, everyone. For those of you who are new to the channel, I'm Jerry McDonough, founder and managing director of NextArc Leadership Solutions, an executive coaching and organizational performance consultancy and advisory firm. As senior executives, you're no strangers to leadership frameworks. You've likely encountered everything from transactional leadership to transformational leadership. And while each of these offers valuable insights, have you ever noticed how sticking rigidly to a single approach can sometimes, well, feel like trying to fix everything with a hammer? That's because truly elite leaders understand that leadership isn't a one-size-fits-all endeavor. It's a more artful, strategic deployment of different approaches depending on the situation. And to illustrate this, I'm going to share one PowerPoint slide with you. That's all we're going to look at today, but it's rich with content and based on gobs of research that we've done over the years. So give me a second and let me share my screen. And you should see that pop up now. Okay, so this is what we refer to as the spectrum of leadership styles. So for more than 30 years, we've been at this, kind of at the forefront of teaching situational leadership practices. We've worked with over 36,000 managers and leaders globally. And importantly, we backed our approach with 7 rigorous studies, kind of well-designed, well-executed pre-post leadership studies demonstrating its real-world impact and efficacy. We don't just talk about leadership, we understand what leadership kind of approaches most reliably drive results. And that's really what we're after, right? So think of it like this. Imagine a golfer heading out for a round with only one club in their bag, a putter. They might be great on the green, right? But how are they going to get there? Similarly, relying solely on kind of one leadership style limits your effectiveness across the diverse challenges and opportunities you face. You need a full bag of clubs, each suited for a specific situation. Think of it like this. So as we cover the details, kind of let's just step back for a moment and first reflect on what leadership is, or kind of more to the point, and in a kind of cause and effect world, what causes you to lead the way you lead? What causes it? Have you ever thought about that? So on the slide that I'm showing here, you'll see what I lovingly call the leadership equation. It's LB equals P plus N plus S plus MLB plus C. What the heck is that, right? So the key is on the right, but let me take you through it step by step. Your leadership behavior, my leadership behavior, everyone's leadership behavior is a function of those several factors. The first one, and this gets to the root of, are leaders born or made? It's a little of both, but it's more made than born. But there is a born into leadership type of dimension to it, and it reveals itself in P, or personality. Your personality is pretty fully fixed by age 10. It doesn't vary much beyond that. So for example, if you're a natural extrovert, with all the training in the world after the age 10, it'd be hard for me to turn you into an introvert, and vice versa. And that's just one of the kind of big personality characteristics that we look at. There are other driving 5 to be exact, 5 different key personality traits, with introversion, extroversion being one of them. So, but again, pretty fully fixed early in life, doesn't change much. It gets a little subtler over time, but it's pretty fully formed by age 10 or so. So that's the P, and that does shape your personality. Obviously, if you're a natural extrovert, you might find it easier to communicate to large groups, which could facilitate your leadership. But there have been any number, scores of excellent leaders over the years who were natural introverts and succeeded very well. So that's the P of the leadership equation. The N, what is that? N is a little similar to personality. It stands for needs, driving needs. And I say it's a little similar only in so much as it doesn't vary much over time. So it's my need for affiliation. It's my need for achievement. It's my need to have some level of power in an organization, right? So that doesn't change much over time either. Your driving needs are a key factor in how you lead. If you early in life are achievement oriented, that's probably going to manifest later in life and all through the stages of life as well. Again, it can get a little more subtle, as many of the personality traits do over time. Some of the need elements also moderate over time, but it's pretty fully formed. So leadership behavior so far is a function of your personality and your driving needs, both which are pretty fully formed early on, right? That would lead some who would rather prefer to improve their leadership to despair a little bit, right? But here's the good news. The rest of it is much more plastic or malleable and very much more a function of learning. So S, this is really the heart of our whole conversation today. S stands for situation. The situation you find yourself in vis-a-vis the strength and maturity of your team, typically. So if you have a brand new team, you may have to be a little more autocratic in so much as directive, right? But if you have a really seasoned team, many of you have experienced this, if you have a really seasoned team, you can be much more participative. In fact, you may step back in certain roles from leadership because someone on your team actually is more expert at that than you are, hopefully, right? So S stands for situation, but knowing how to address various situations, situational leadership is key. And that's definitely a learned function. You know, how to apply and know which leadership styles to apply given a certain situation. Just like a golf club example, right? It's knowing when to select a driver versus a pitching wedge or a putter, right? Depends on the distance from the hole and the lie of the ball, right? So knowing how to select the right leadership style given the situation is really what elite leadership is all about. The next is MLB, not Major League Baseball, your manager's leadership behavior. So whomever you're reporting to, for CEOs on the line, it could be a board member or the board in its entirety. If you're private capital sponsor, it could be the deal team or some member of the deal team. If you're below a CEO level, it could be the CEO, right? So whoever your direct boss is, their leadership behavior has a fairly significant, at least short-term impact on your leadership behavior within that organization. So MLB. And then the last is C, that stands for culture. Those are the cultural norms or forces acting upon all of us that essentially tells us what it takes to survive and thrive around here. What's a behavioral norm that if you cross that, you get into trouble, or if you adhere to that, you're kind of lauded. So the culture, its policies, promotional policies, compensation policies, decision rights, all of those, the composite of things, and that's the subject of another presentation that I've done and more that I'll be doing. But those cultural forces have a pretty profound impact on everyone's leadership within an organization. So LB equals P plus N plus S plus MLB plus C. All right. So hopefully that's helpful just in terms of stepping to a 30,000-foot level and looking down upon leadership. So the NextArc approach outlines 6 distinct viable leadership styles along this spectrum. And the spectrum we're talking about moving left to right, red, blue, green, right? So I'm going to discuss that now with you and think about this maybe through 2 lenses, through yourself and then maybe through your boss, right? Try to discern as we go through this which leadership characteristics you have predominantly and which leadership practices or characteristics does your boss or performance manager have. So every leader has a primary style. This is important, a primary style and a backup style as well. And often kind of go to that backup, sometimes with a quick trigger. And it's often the backup style, the one we default to under pressure, that can inadvertently trip us up. So the primary style is the one we use most of the time. Backup style we go to typically under duress and sometimes in a quick trigger response to that. So the most effective leaders, however, learn to operate across this entire spectrum, deploying the right style at the right time. So let's take a high-level look at the spectrum. On the far left, we have what we call the dominant styles. These tend to be very task-oriented, more management than leadership, sometimes at the expense of people. While individuals in these styles may hold leadership titles, their approach often leans more towards management than true leadership. On the far right, we see styles that are heavily influenced by people, rules, or even kind of a resistance to progress. And in the center, that's where we find really the sweet spot. It's the styles that effectively balance short-term needs with long-term vision, tasks with people, and structure with innovation. Now, I'll walk you through each of these styles from left to right, including a seventh style that, while present, and we'll talk about it, isn't really a viable leadership style at all, right? And I'll get to that in a moment. So let me give you some detail on each of the styles. The first, and we're starting at the left side of the spectrum, under the red banner, is what we call dominant negative. And that's anchoring the left side of the spectrum, or as we affectionately refer to them, perhaps a little kind of cautiously call them the commanders, right? So this is the most aggressive style on the spectrum. Think inflexible, highly task-oriented, often defensive, and relying heavily on positional power. Frankly, while you might find people in leadership roles exhibiting this behavior, it's more accurately described as pure management, not the nuanced influence of true leadership. And I'll try to give you a few examples of people who fall into these categories as we go through. So who might fall into this dominant negative style? Think of figures like Travis Kalanick, right? Co-founder of former CEO of Uber, was a dominant negative, clearly, as evidenced his kind of well-documented, aggressive, uncompromising, highly task-focused approach during Uber's kind of hyper-growth phase. Or a coach, think of a coach, Jimmy Johnson, dating myself a little bit, but the former head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, who unfortunately for him also worked for and was fired by another dominant negative with a bigger business card, that being Jerry Jones. Both were dominant negatives. What happened there is utterly predictable. If you have two dominant negatives, they can't exist very long together. The one with the greatest authority, in this case, Jerry Jones, will prevail. And it usually prevails, and it doesn't look good for the subordinate dominant negative. Even if they're winning, by the way, which they were, right? The next style on the spectrum, we move to slightly to the right, we find dominant positive, or the patriarch or matriarch, right? Now, these leaders are every bit as dominant as the commander, the dominant negative we just met, but it's a more kind of polished dominance. It's often joked that they're kind of dressed up dominant negatives. They're still highly directive, but they mask it with a veneer of professionalism, perhaps even a paternalistic or maternalistic attitude. Their carefully curated image often reinforces their authority. So dressed up dominant negative, and we call that person the dominant positive. Who might fall into this style? Well, consider someone like Jeff Bezos, early in Amazon's growth, known for his relentless drive and high standards, but with a carefully crafted public image. Or going back further and into politics, President Theodore Roosevelt, probably, who brought a vigorous, powerful presence to the Oval Office, while often framing his actions for the public good, right? So probably a dressed up dominant positive. Now we move into the blue zone, right? So the active positive, we call that, the nickname is the craftsperson. Now here we're talking about truly elite leadership. This is where it lies. Like the dominant styles, they're results oriented, but their definition of results, this is important, is much more sophisticated. They aim for wins that not only meet immediate needs, as would a mere manager, right? But also build sustainable success for the future. The hallmark of leadership, they build other leaders. So they're both short-term and long-term minded, and those blended into one definition of success. Unlike the dominant styles, very short-term focused. They're fiercely competitive, these active positives. But crucially, here's a big difference. Unlike the dominant styles who compete with everybody, their primary competition is with their own previous best performance. They're less aggressive, more adaptable, excellent at balancing tasks and people, and highly rational and goal-driven. Our research consistently shows that active positive leaders are the most effective, and most effective in most situations, most of the time. Who might fall into this style? Well, imagine, let's say, Satya Nadella of Microsoft, known for kind of revitalizing the company by focusing on both innovation and a healthier culture. On the political side, probably Dwight Eisenhower, who was a brilliant strategist and organizer, but also balance a clear vision with a pragmatic approach. Or in the world of professional sports, think about Greg Popovich of the San Antonio Spurs, renowned for continuous innovation, player development, and sustained excellence built on a balanced approach. Excuse me while I take a sip. Okay, let's continue to move to the right. We're going to look at and encounter the active neutral, really interesting style, also nicknamed the salesman. These leaders are typically highly intelligent and exceptional communicators, great communicators. They excel at painting a compelling picture of the future and inspiring others with their vision. They're less aggressive and flexible, balancing tasks and people, but with an inclination toward the people side slightly. However, a common pitfall is that they often operate at such a high strategic level, they struggle with the granular details. This makes them a little hard to believe or even unctuous, right? They don't quite get it. Their teams might sometimes wonder, does this person actually know how things work around here at ground level, right? They're always flying high. Nevertheless, when paired with a strong operational leader or two or more, active neutral leaders can be incredibly effective. So who might fall into this style? Let's see. So, Indra Nooyi, who was the former CEO of PepsiCo, who famously articulated a vision of performance with purpose, inspiring a shifting towards healthier products and sustainability, and often delegating the operational specifics, right? By the way, I had the great pleasure of working with Indra and her team to promote an organizational culture to support her performance with purpose agenda. So Indra would be definitely one in this style band. Or think of a coach like Pete Carroll, known for his kind of infectious optimism and motivational speeches, even as most of the offensive and defensive schemes were being handled by his coordinators or assistant coaches. Now we go to active negative. What's that? So the active negative, its nickname is the rules keeper. So while still an active style, what truly drives them is an unwavering commitment to rules, norms, and established procedures. A stark contrast to the visionary active neutral, who we just met, right? They're typically less aggressive unless a rule is broken, at which point they can become quite animated, even dominant. They are flexible on some things, accept the established way of doing things, don't deviate. They're persuaded by data and precedent, often asking questions like, where has this been successfully tried and worked before, as they consider any new idea? Who might fall into this style? So imagine a CEO of a highly regulated industry or financial institution like Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase. He's known for his rigorous adherence to compliance and risk management. On the political spectrum, probably President George H.W. Bush, who was a former CIA director who emphasized order, international protocols, and adherence to established foreign policy norms. Or a coach like even former coach of Alabama football, Nick Saban, known for his incredibly detailed processes, strict adherence to a process, and unwavering discipline in how things were done around there. Now we continue our journey right, and we meet the passive positive, nicknamed the peacekeeper. So these leaders are extremely people-oriented. Remember, we met task orientation to the left of the spectrum. Now we're moving deeper into the people orientation. However, their strong focus on maintaining harmony, that's their watchword, harmony, cohesion, and avoiding conflict often leads them to prioritize people's feelings over results. They're often well-liked, but rarely make plan. They don't succeed from making a plan perspective and hitting their goals. They're very people-oriented. They are the least aggressive, ironically more flexible when it comes to decisions that might cause interpersonal friction, even if it's beneficial for the company, and may withdraw from difficult conversations, particularly those involving, no surprise, organizational results or financial performance. So who might you know that's probably this style of passive positive? Consider President Jimmy Carter, who was deeply committed to human rights and peace building, sometimes at the expense of political expediency, or a coach who might struggle to make tough cuts or even difficult performance conversations, prioritizing team morale above all else, leading to underperformance of the team, right? So again, that people orientation at the expense of everything else. Now, lastly, remember I said there were 6 styles, but there really is a 7th style. I don't consider it a leadership style. And the reason being is it's really the abdication of leadership. But we see it and fairly often, and particularly in difficult times, we see it more and more. During the COVID period, we saw it during earlier in the financial crisis of 2007, 8, 9, right? We saw many heretofore exceptional leaders start to glitch into this style, passive, neutral, negative. And it anchors the right side of the spectrum. And this isn't really, again, not really a leadership style at all. These individuals may be disengaged, checked out, or maybe going through often some personal or professional challenges that lead to withdrawal, kind of a glitch in their style, as I mentioned. Their behavior is highly unpredictable, sometimes aggressive, sometimes withdrawn, sometimes flexible, often not. While they typically avoid conflict, their anger can really erupt at any time and unexpectedly, causing significant disruption. Of all the styles, these pose the greatest potential risk to an organization. Who might fall into this non-style? Well, think of a leader who becomes completely disengaged during a crisis, allowing their organization to kind of drift, like a CEO who is publicly missing in action, they'll often say, or where are they? What's their opinion about this significant issue? Why are they laying so low during a major scandal? President Richard Nixon on the political spectrum in the final days of Watergate comes to mind. Increasingly isolated and erratic, or a coach who simply loses the locker room and becomes ineffective, perhaps even abandoning their duties or showing unpredictable behavior. So that's the spectrum of leadership styles nested under the leadership equation. And so the key takeaways here is that the 6 viable leadership styles on the spectrum and the 7th style to be wary of. Remember, the most effective leaders are the active positives, understand these different approaches and can skillfully deploy themselves across that spectrum as needed. Even active positives don't stay active positive all the time. They're choosing. They're just typically first primary style is the active positive style. And even when they deviate, they migrate quickly back to that active positive. So interestingly, when under pressure, most of the leaders across the spectrum, any of those that I defined, tend to default to the style immediately to their left on the spectrum under pressure. So when you have pressure, a dominant positive becomes more like a dominant negative, right? A passive positive might adopt some active neutral salesmanship to protect a cherished rule. So moving to the left. And worst of all, an already dominant negative goes, where do they go? They're anchoring the left side of the spectrum. We jokingly say they go dominant damn negative, really harsh, right? So the exception, active positive leaders, again, that blue style in the middle, under significant duress, they often shift, and this is somewhat ironic, 2 steps to the left, becoming more dominant negative, highly directive in a crisis and task focused. But the crucial difference here is that they do so intentionally, they choose it, they don't glitch to it, they choose it, and they revert back to the active positive style once the crisis is brought under control. So understanding your own primary and backup leadership styles and recognizing the styles of those around you, particularly your manager, but others, peers, and others that you hope to influence within an organization, is the first step towards becoming a more adaptable, effective, and ultimately a more successful leader. Then, after this, the ability and habit of being able to situationally flex across the styles is really what elite leadership is made of. So there you have it. As we conclude, if you'd like to talk about how to elevate your leadership practice to elite level, I'm offering you a complimentary 30-minute talent strategy planning call with me personally. During our conversation, I'll take the time to understand your current situation, your leadership aspirations, the economics you seek, and your timeline. And following our call, I'll send you a comprehensive personalized talent strategy plan that assesses your readiness, pinpoints strengths to leverage and soft spots to kind of improve upon, and includes my preliminary guidance on how to move your leadership to the elite level. Now, why do I offer this initial consultation and follow-up report for free? Well, the answer to this is pretty straightforward. Well, there's absolutely no obligation for you to engage my services beyond this call. Many of the leaders I've had this call with and submitted the report to do tend to work with me longer term. and to really significantly improve their leadership effectiveness and accelerate their readiness for the next big role. But there's zero expectation, none at all. So this is simply about creating some initial efficient momentum for you when it comes to your leadership and organizational effectiveness. You'll walk away with a clear starting point either way, but you do need to schedule a call to receive the report. And for those of you who are interested, just click on the calendar link below to schedule 30 minutes with me. And thank you. Hope you found this helpful.